Good evening and welcome to the 2023 CRC Speaker Series featuring the Honorable Dr. Ralph Gonsalves, excuse me. Thank you for the correction. My name is Dr. Ken Irish Bramble and I am the Executive Director of the Caribbean Research Center here at Medgar College. We are joining you this evening live from the Edison O. Jackson Auditorium at Medgar College in Crown Heights, Brooklyn. I want to welcome those of you joining us in person, and I also want to welcome those of you joining us via YouTube at the Caribbean Research Center at Medgar College's YouTube channel. Those of you joining us in St. Vincent via VC3 TV, API, NBC Radio, and Star FM, welcome to you. We hope that you'll enjoy this evening's program. At this point in time, I'd like everyone to please rise for the playing of the national anthems. First, the U.S. national anthem.
What so proudly we hail, and the twilight's last gleaming, whose voice shines and bright stars through the perilous fight. O'er the ramparts we watched, were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, sing us that star-spangled banner yet wave, o'er the land of the brave, and the home of the brave.
This evening, the national anthem of St. Vincent and the Grenadines is going to be performed live by Miss Earlene Williams King.
St. Vincent, land so beautiful, with joyful hearts we pledge to thee our loyalty and love, and vow to keep you brings. Our faith will see us through. May peace reign from shore to shore, and the good grace and keep us true. Our little sister islands are those gems the lovely grenadines upon their seas, and golden sands the sunshine never beams. Whatever the future brings, our faith will see us through. May peace reign from shore to shore, and good bliss and keep us true.
Please be seated. This evening's program is brought to you in collaboration with some of our community partners, in particular, the sponsorship of the Caribbean American Society of New York, CASONI, and the Caribbean American Chamber of Commerce, Incorporated. At this time, I'd like to invite representatives from our co-sponsors and community partners to the stage. First, I'd like to introduce the president of the Caribbean American Society of New York, Mr. Horace Davis.
Good evening.
Good evening.
All right. Greetings all. Greetings to the Honorable Dr. Ralph Gonsalves, Prime Minister, and greetings to our host, Dr. Ken Irish Bramble. The passion by which you take on your task to ensure representation of our community is truly commendable, and we thank you for that. My name is Horace Davis, and I am the president of the Caribbean American Society of New York. The overarching mission of CASONI is to build and cultivate a stronger sense of pride within the Caribbean American community. CASONI is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. And there are four main pillars or objectives of this organization. First is in line with business, supporting businesses that support our community, whether that is through training, workforce development, ensuring that in our community, we are building and continuing to turn around the dollars instead of them leaving our community. Our second objective is education, with a special focus on STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. We recognize that education is important, but it is equally important to ensure that the education received by our children, the next generation, is aligned with the careers of the future. And so that is one of the greatest passions of this organization. And there is a special focus on our younger youth, kindergarten through 8th grade, because we don't want them to be afraid of the sciences and math and so forth. We want to make sure that as they start to think about careers, they consider these careers, which are really the careers of the future. Our third objective is networking. And I need not say much about that, other than how important it is as a community for us to share and leverage the resources that we have for the collective strength of our community. And fourth, last but surely not least, is to engage in the development of policies, legislation, and regulation that impacts our community. I always say to folks that, there's nothing wrong with a rally, but you probably won't find me there. I think if we're having rallies, that means that we're not out front ensuring that those policies that will prevent those kinds of responses is just not present. And I want to be brief, so I'm just going to leave with this because I think this is very critical and important to understand why this organization is so important and why it can be so relevant in New York City and New York State. As an engineer, I look at things in terms of numbers. And I say to you that 5 of the top 9 immigrant countries in New York City has one thing in common. And that is they are all Caribbean islands. And the number 1 immigrant country in New York City is a Caribbean island, the Dominican Republic. So if we think about bringing together our community as one, just in terms of numbers, and leveraging the influence that we should have at the ballot box, in our businesses, and all over, I think we would be truly unstoppable. And so with that, I will thank everyone for being here today. I think it's so important that as we connect here in New York, we connect with our respective islands collectively. And that is what this is really and truly about. And I hope we'll do much more of this as we move forward into the future. Thank you so much, and looking forward to an awesome program, Dr. Irish Bramble.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Next, I'd like to invite to the podium Ms. Anna Walker. And Ms. Anna Walker is a longtime supporter of the Caribbean Research Center and a well-known figure in not only the Caribbean American business community, but also in the Caribbean American political arena. And Ms. Walker is here this evening representing the Caribbean American Chamber of Commerce Incorporated, bringing us some brief remarks.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
You are indeed in the right place at the right time. And I'm happy to see so many familiar faces. So give yourselves a round of applause for being here. We could have been doing other things, but today we are going to share with others all information that they missed by not being here. I am a proud member of CACI, founding member. My name is Anna Walker Golson, and I hail from Panama, Central America. It is a privilege to address you today. The Caribbean Chamber of Commerce has been around for 37 years. We'll be celebrating our 38 years soon. I can see that we have Dr. Castro. We have Erlene San a few moments ago. I see quite a few others of you. I won't call all your names, but we know each other. I've been board member of the Caribbean Research Center, working along with Ms. De Longoria, and also with Dr. Waldemar Stewart and Dr. Irish. And you guys know, working with them, we have acquired a lot of wisdom that we can share with you. Now, what is the Caribbean Chamber? The Caribbean Chamber of Commerce is the Caribbean Chamber, American Chamber of Commerce and Industry Incorporated. It was formed 37 years ago in August 1985. And we do been servicing the New York City Council and Small Business Services for over 30 years, providing a numerous amount of business services. But one of the highlights I would like to share with you today, we cover business services on how to start and manage a business. And right now we are focusing on our young people so that we can help them to develop themselves and have better choices for their families and the community. However, we also launched a new program to help the small businesses like restaurants and barbershops and beauty parlors to have sustainability and also to have succession planning as family businesses, which means we are now engaging in a program where we will have training for mini chefs. So because they are busy, they don't have time to train their children in the business that they're in, we will be doing the training for them. So here we go with all that they need, the reading, writing, and all of that, and the math. But today, I would also like to share with you, our headquarters is in the Brooklyn area. And right there, for all of you from St. Vincent and all the other Caribbean nations, we would like to share with you. We have a STEM program there. They bus in 8 different high schools for the children to come there. Right now, they are working on hurricane-proof housing, and they are also working on electrical cars, right? You can get a chance through us to test these cars, and we welcome to do that, anyone. Pretty soon, we'll be doing a special program from farm to table, because we have 15,000 square feet of agriculture garden. And with that, we are going to invite the community to be part of us as farmers for a day. We believe an experienced counselor is usually the best. So by giving you that opportunity, you will just go out, tell your neighbor on your right, and tell your neighbor on your left, and share. We believe in always caring and sharing. And with that respect, I would like to welcome Mr. Adrian Peters, who is a long founding member of the Caribbean Chamber, to join me. We are proud of him. He started his career in banking, and right now, he's the vice president of New York Community Bank. Because of the work of Dr. Irish and Dr. Stewart, Ms. De Longoria, and others, we will be able to share with you some more powerful thoughts on the banking system for our community. So please give a round of applause to Mr. Adrian Peters.
Good evening, everyone. I understand the Right Honorable Dr. Gonsalves will be with us, distinguished guest. Yes. My name is Adrian Peters. As Anna said, I work with New York Community Bank officially. I'm a vice president of one of the New York Community Bank. I manage 2 branches for the bank. So that's my official capacity here today. But more importantly, I am proud Vincentian. I got introduced to CRC many years ago through Dr. Roy Hastings. And I'm really a steadfast member of the Caribbean American Chamber of Industry and Commerce because I believe in Dr. Hastings' vision of trying to help, particularly people, minority origin, small businesses, to give them a hand up, and especially in the USA. You know, one of the things I've been a part of through the chamber is doing networking seminars, small business seminars, helping the people to get access to financing or just teaching them about what they need to do when it comes to starting their own business or sourcing the financing for their business. So I am happy to be here. I see a number of these distinguished fellow Vincentians with us. Thank you. I haven't seen you in such a long time. You know, sometimes it's getting connected. It takes an event like this to bring us together, and that's part of what all these events are about: is bringing the diaspora together and helping us to develop those connections between the Caribbean and America here. There's a lot of opportunity. There are a lot of good things happening with the chamber, as Anna mentioned, and hopefully at the end of the day, we could all find a way to come together and work together to make it a better and stronger place. As a fellow Vincentian, I really hope that, you know, St. Vincent, there's a lot to be done to develop our nation, and I think we can do that well from here. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. This time I want to acknowledge the presence of a few people who are in the audience. I want to acknowledge the presence of Ms. Dana Lennon, I hope I pronounced that correctly, who is here representing Mr. Giovanni D. Williams, who of course needs no introduction here in New York City, our New York City public advocate. And we just want to mention that we are honored to have you here. I also want to acknowledge the presence of Pastor Louis Straker. I'm sorry, did I pronounce that correctly? Yes. All right, thank you very much. From Reflections Church of Brooklyn, and thank you, sir, for gracing us with your presence. At this point in time, I want to bring or invite to bring remarks two representatives of the college community. Of course, we at the Caribbean Research Center are rooted here at Medgar Evers. It is literally in our name. First, I want to invite to the podium someone who also certainly locally needs no real introduction. I've known this lady. I don't think I even recognizes. I keep saying that I don't know if she knows how long and how far back we go. But she was a key figure in the educational system, as being a key figure in the Caribbean American community overall. Is extremely well known in our local and domestic politics, and who currently serves as the Dean of the School of Professional Studies and Senior Advisor to the President. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Dr. Evelyn Castro.
Thank you so much,
to the Honorable Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Dr. Ralph Gonsalves, to the Council General, McIntosh, who met with the President, to our Provost, who has a Barbadian ancestry, to Dr. Irish Gamble, to our esteemed faculty and staff members who are here, to Anna Walker, and the distinguished members of CACI who are here, and all of our distinguished guests. And most of all, to our beloved students, good evening. So, he named me as Evelyn Castro, but it's really Evelyn Williams Castro.com, which is Jamaica, right? Puerto Rico, Trinidad, and a little bit of Guyana. So it's all kinds of rice and peas. So I bring you greetings, and we're most honored to be hosting the Prime Minister this evening. Medgar Evers continues to stand for social justice and equity for all persons. And in that regard, part of our fabric and foundation is the inclusion of our students and our faculty from the Caribbean, particularly St. Vincent and the Grenadines this evening. Medgar Evers College has been a beacon of hope, providing a platform for students to engage, to educate, to empower themselves. This institution understands that education is not confined to the boundaries of the classroom. Our president has just returned from Mississippi, where she took students to look at the home of Medgar Wiley Evers. She continues to push that. So we know that the classroom extends far beyond textbooks. It's about nurturing critical thinking, encouraging dialogue, and fostering empathy. It's about equipping individuals with the knowledge and tools to challenge injustice and champion equality everywhere. Of our distinguished colleagues who hail from St. Vincent, one of our school leaders, who you will hear from this evening, is Cheryl Ann Mason. Proud to be working with her. We welcome all in attendance tonight and look forward to learning and hearing more about St. Vincent and the Grenadines, all of the challenges and all of the triumphs. So thank you.
Next, I'd like to invite to the stage a new figure here at Medgar Evers College, but undoubtedly someone who is going to leave a mark, a legacy. She is currently serving as the provost, and as such has responsibility for the full oversight of all of our academic centers here on campus. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Dr. Antoinette Coleman.
Good evening. I'm here on behalf of the President and myself to welcome the Honorable Prime Minister Gonsalves to our humble Medgar Evers College, and to also welcome the Council General McIntosh. Thank you. And of course, all of our guests that are here visiting Medgar today, and our native St. Vincent and the Grenadines members of the Medgar family, our students, our faculty, and our staff. But as always, I never like to follow Dr. Castro because she always takes my talking points. But when I think of St. Vincent, I think of the time that I spent in the Caribbean working on graduate programs and international study abroad programs for students. And I was told that I had to stay in St. Thomas. But a couple of your fellow countrymen, Council General, came to me and said, "Why don't you go to St. Vincent?" And of course I said, because I'm always game for new travel, I said, yes. So we went to your country. And while I was there, I shopped a little bit too much. I mean, a little bit too much. So the students and I had to decide how we were to get back into St. Thomas through customs. There was this nice gentleman, and I remember, and that's what I think about Maker as a family that welcomes all. This gentleman said, I'm looking at your passport, but I'm looking at the way you care about these students. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna just take you over and let you ship it back to St. Thomas, and then you're on your own. So I wanted to share that personal story because I know that the people in St. Vincent and the Grenadines really care about everyone else. They could have left me there with my over shopping and my students over shopping, but no, they cared about us. And that is what I really enjoy about being at Maker. We care about our students, whether they are international students coming to us. We want to learn. We want to learn the diversity that exists in this global world. There is not just one culture, there are many cultures, and that's what an education institution is about. And in the role that I've been given the opportunity to serve in, we want to see that threaded throughout our curriculum. So tonight, as I said, on behalf of the President and the Honorable Prime Minister who is listening, we want to see more students from your country here at Maker. And we will welcome them and we will treat them as nicely as the gentleman treated me at the airport as I was trying to get through with my official. That kind of love never leaves one's heart, and we will always pay it back and pay it forward. I thank you for being here this evening.
In addition to being part of our ongoing series, this evening's program is also brought to you as part of a broader celebration. As many of you know, this month is the National Caribbean American Heritage Month, and that fact is in large part due to the work of a key figure in not only on the intellectual scene, but also in the community development scene. She considers herself a futurist, and I'll say that this is she was actually the first person that I actually ever heard utilize the term. She's a powerful speaker, a great leader. Her enthusiasm and her commitment to honoring and respecting the contribution of Caribbean Americans is unrivaled, as is her commitment to seeing a stronger relationship between the Caribbean diaspora and the region itself. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in giving a round of applause and welcoming to the podium none other than Dr. Claire Nelson of the Institute of Caribbean Studies, Washington, D.C. Oh, she stepped, oh, okay. So we will, perhaps we'll hear from her later, but we did want to acknowledge her presence and give her an opportunity to share some brief remarks. Okay, having done that, I'd like to invite next to the podium none other than the Consulate General of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Mr. Randy Luther McIntosh, to bring us some brief remarks as well.
Thank you very much and good evening, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Bramble. Dr. the Honorable Ralph E. Gonsalves, Dr. Coleman, Dr. Castro, Director Sherilyn Mason, Pastor Louis Stricker, Vice President Mr. Peters, sponsors, distinguished guests, students, ladies and gentlemen. Now, I try not to, as we celebrate the Caribbean, to state our strength over what I think a Vincentian is known for. And that was highlighted here by the good doctor. She said that when they got to the airport with this bulk of luggage because of all the shopping, that courtesies were extended to them. And she is now extending those courtesies to our students to compliment their efforts. But something I like to get clear, Doc, is that I'm pretty sure they didn't charge you. So we expect when our students come here, you will return that to you. Thank you very much. Now, I bring greetings on behalf of the government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, the consulate, and our people. I am honored to speak at this noble institution. I ascribe the term noble to this institution for their sterling contribution to the academic development of the Caribbean civilization. The name Medgar Evers echoes throughout our region, right here in Brooklyn, the largest community Caribbean diaspora community. As an institution pivotal to the achievement of our people and our islands, many of our Caribbean nationals passed through these hallowed halls. And I can tell you, there's hardly anywhere you will go in the Caribbean and a conversation is started about being schooled in the United States and in Brooklyn, and Medgar Evers' name is not mentioned. We thank you very, very much. The great Medgar Evers, the World War II veteran, the civil rights activist, he who inspired legislative action, and he who was assassinated must be rested peacefully, knowing that his name is associated with an institution that is synonymous with greatness and unwavering support to our Caribbean community. In the words of Mahatma Gandhi, the best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others. Today, we created history in New York City by having the first ever CARICOM flag raising to celebrate our 50th anniversary. CARICOM is the oldest surviving integration movement in the developing world. And right here in Brooklyn is evident that the CARICOM people, we are alive and well. This evening, we will hear from one of the longest serving leaders in our Caribbean community. I will not speak to his illustrious career as our Vincentian stalwart. A member of staff right here, Director Sherilyn Mason, will do the honors. Let me conclude by saying Happy Caribbean American Heritage Month. I pray that Caribbean people will never, ever forget the journey we took, or our parents took, our grandparents took, to get here to this great nation. That we must always remember to give back. Remittances, keep in touch with family and friends, and let us build the Caribbean and our countries individually. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
I know that we came to hear a lecture, we came to hear a speech, but for those of you who are familiar with our program, we like to take a little break in the midst of the presentations to also bring you a celebration of our culture, right? I think it's equally as important that we share our intellectual thoughts, our historical perspectives, that we also celebrate the culture of our people and of our community. This evening's cultural presentation is brought to you by the students of the Medgar Evers College Preparatory School, which is affixed and annexed to the college itself. This evening, we have the Medgar College Prep School's Dance Theater, who will be bringing us a brief presentation under the directorship of Miss Valerie McLeod-Katz. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce the Med Prep, as I call them, Dance Theater. All right, just a little note. I have to put in a plug for the school. So Medgar Prep School is a 6th grade through 12th grade school. It is an accelerated educational program. Most of their students complete all of their high school testing requirements before they actually enter high school. So meaning by the time that they've completed 8th grade, most of these young people have already taken the 5 required exams in order to earn a high school diploma. They've already taken sufficient high school level credits to actually earn a high school diploma. The next 4 years, as far as high school graduation is concerned, are just a formality, right? It's a formality of saying you've been there. So then you're going to ask me, well, what do they do during the 4 years that they're in high school? That's correct, right? They're next to a college, right? So these young people then go on to start taking college credits through a number of programs, the College Now program, the Smart Scholars program. They take an extensive number of AP courses or advanced placement courses. Many of them, I don't remember the actual number this year, but if I remember, it was in the 70s. What was it, Dr. Castro? 50 this year? Okay, so this year, over 50 of their high school graduates actually earned and received an associate's degree, technically, before they got their high school diploma. And in case you're wondering, like all of this is also done in the context of a very rich extracurricular programming. So some of which you've seen here, the dance theater. I remember the first time I went, this was pre-pandemic, and actually saw their end of year dance concert, and I mean, I was blown away. This is. You want to come and talk about it?
No, I don't want to come and talk about it, but what I do want to say is that Dr. Castro's
Yes.
granddaughter,
Uh-huh.
Naomi,
Uh-huh.
is one
Oh, yes, I
of
know
our
Naomi well.
dancers. She's now at Hampton, and just an amazing program. It is really the largest dance theater arts program within the New York City public system. We, a couple weeks ago, we put 460 students in music, dance, theater, vocal music on stage at Prospect Heights. It really is an amazing program. The few students that you saw here today are just a smattering, right? Because the other students, they're out of scholarship for dance, as Naomi was. They study with professional companies, in addition, and they do. It's an amazing program. I need not tell you. So the next time we have our shows, please, I do encourage you to come because it really is an amazing program.
Absolutely.
Alongside the academics.
Alongside the academics. And it's not just the arts, they also have a very vibrant athletics program and other academic enrichment programs. So for those of you who are in the New York City area and you have young people who you want to channel towards a rigorous academic program that also looks at holistic education, providing exposure to the arts, to STEM, to athletics, and so on. Please do consider Medgar Evers College Preparatory School as one of your options, and in my opinion, as your top option. All right, and so now, what we've all been waiting for, I'd like to invite to my podium, actually, to introduce our keynote speaker, Ms. Cheryl Ann Mason, who is the director of the SEEK program here at Medgar Evers College. Ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Cheryl Ann Mason.
Thank you, Dr. Irish Bramble. Protocol having been established, I wish you all a pleasant evening. Buiti Raban Weyu. That is Garifuna for good evening. This evening, it is my honor as a proud daughter of the land of Yorome, Hairuna, home of the blessed, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, to introduce our featured guest speaker for the Caribbean Research Center's lecture series, Dr. the Honorable Ralph E. Gonsalves, who will deliver a message titled, Honoring Our Journey, Shaping Our Future. Dr. the Honorable Ralph E. Gonsalves is the longest serving Prime Minister in the Caribbean. He was first elected Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines on March 28, 2001. He was subsequently re-elected in 2005, 2010, 2015, and 2020. Prime Minister Gonsalves holds a PhD in government from the University of Manchester in England and a Barrister of Law degree from the Gray's Inn, London. Prior to becoming Prime Minister, Dr. Gonsalves was regarded as one of the most prominent law practitioners in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Dr. Gonsalves has written and published extensively on Caribbean affairs, African affairs, trade unionism, political economy, and developmental issues. His many publications include History and the Future, A Caribbean Perspective, 1994, The Case for Caribbean Reparatory Justice, 2014, The Trial of George McIntosh and the 1935 Uprising in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, 2020, and his latest, A Time of Despair, Beyond COVID, Volcanic Eruptions, Hurricane Elsa, and Global Turmoil, Fresh Hopes for St. Vincent and the Grenadines, 2022. Prime Minister Ralph Gonsalves is married to Eloise Gonsalves Nee Harris. He is the father of 3 sons and 2 daughters. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to introduce to you this evening's featured guest speaker, Dr. the Honorable Ralph E. Gonsalves.
Good evening, and thank you very much, Cheryl, for the introduction. And I want to thank all those who have spoken before, and especially to thank the Caribbean Research Center and the Medgar Evers College for hosting this important activity this evening. I want to recognize very much His Excellency Randy Luther McIntosh and Dr. Ken Irish Bramble and Horace Davis and Ann Walker and Evelyn Castro and Antoinette Coleman. I'm I was touched by the dance theater company of the Medgar Evers group. And of course, I'm very pleased to be with you at this very iconic college, which carries the name of a very important historic figure. I first of all tender my regret, my apologies for not being with you in person. The exigencies of the circumstances kept me at home. There were many things which I had to handle here, and I'm about to go off on a 7-day visit to Ghana and to London and Paris, and it wasn't possible in all the circumstances with some domestic matters for me to have made the trip to New York at this time. I promise, however, that I will visit you at Medgar Evers in the not too distant future. I'll be there, God's willing, at the time of the United Nations General Assembly in the 3rd week in September this year. I want to acknowledge the presence too of Pastor Louis Straker. Louis, I was with your father for the entire day here at the cabinet meeting in the government of St. Vincent and Grenadines. In fact, in this very room from which I'm speaking, we were here at the cabinet meeting up to after 5:30 or close to 5:30. It has been a long day, but I'm looking forward very much to the discussion this evening on the subject of really honoring our journey and facing our future, and to look at our Caribbean and how we have evolved, and the role of the diaspora in this evolution and in fact in the future, and to see how we can address some of our contemporary challenges while meeting in some efficacious way some of the historical legacies of underdevelopment. I don't know how much time you have allotted me to speak, but I will, if you indicate at some time that I'm putting you to sleep, it's fine. I will just simply shut up but I have a few things to say, and I want to say them as candidly as I possibly can. The Caribbean, and this is the week for our Caribbean heritage, but our Caribbean heritage is not isolated. This month, we have very much the anniversary of the 1619 arrival of the first enslaved African bodies in the United States of America, in Virginia. And that's an important remembrance. Memory is critical. I want to begin, since we are talking about the history, our present, and our future, with a very important, it's a beautiful poem, the poetic lines of one of our celebrated poets from the Caribbean, if Ascension, Daniel Williams, who in a poem entitled We Are the Cenotaphs, he addresses this question of the past, the present, and the future. He says, we are all time, yet only the future is ours to desecrate. The present is the past, and the past, our fathers' mischiefs. We are all time, yet only the future is ours to desecrate. It is important, therefore, to avoid the desecration of our future. And I've heard comments made about business and education, which are all directed towards an avoidance of the desecration of our future. But the poet tells us that the present is the past. And the past, largely our father's mischiefs, because the societies certainly have been patriarchal. And issues arise immediately in that particular poetic formulation. So I want to begin with that. I want to begin also with another poetic reflection from another celebrated poet, another Vincentian. You'll find his works in several anthologies of Caribbean poetry. Ellsworth Shakeen, in a poem called Private Prayer, written in 1973 on the occasion of the publication of How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, the original publication by Bogle Louverture Publications of London. This volume, written by the revolutionary intellectual Walter Rodney, book published in dozens of languages, and one of the outstanding books on political economy in the 20th century. And we should all read it, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. And Shakeen says this. I want to read it from Private Prayer. To understand how the whole thing run, I have to ask my parents and even my daughter and son. To understand the form of compromise I am, I must in my own voice ask how the whole thing run. To ask why I don't dream in the same language I live in, I must rise up among the syllables of my parents in the land which I am and form a whole daughter and a whole son out of the compromise which I am. To understand history, I have to come home. To come home, and we have to come home to ourselves. The fever of our history has made us compromises. Doesn't mean, however, we have to be compromising in respect of what we hold dear to us. We do not have to compromise our principles, nor indeed our interests or our humanity. But to understand this history, in coming home to ourselves and to see the world through the prism of our own eyes, we have to ask our grandparents, have to ask our parents. We have to ask our sons and our daughters. And what do we have to do? We have to make a whole son and a whole daughter out of the compromises which the fever of history have constructed in us. Now, we have to put all of this in a very special landscape and seascape called the Caribbean. But what is the Caribbean? Let's deal with the geography first, and I want to put the net wide, because there's a tendency for us in the Caribbean to speak about the Caribbean as the English-speaking Caribbean. And it's a very important part of the Caribbean. But there's the Spanish-speaking Caribbean, there's the French-speaking Caribbean, and there's the Dutch-speaking Caribbean. All countries and territories shaped by Europe. Indeed, Europe remade the Caribbean, and in the process remade itself. It's a profound point that Europe hasn't yet properly understood. Even though the streets of London and Paris, you walk it and you see the Caribbean, but it hasn't quite touched their consciousnesses. So let us talk about this Caribbean geographically first. There are 14 countries in an institution called CARICOM, which Luther, our Consul General, has just indicated that next month we'll be celebrating 50 years, the oldest integration organization, mechanism, entity in the developing world. These 15 countries are largely English-speaking. These 14 countries are largely English-speaking. The whole chain of islands from the Bahamas come right down to Trinidad and Tobago. And then we go to South America with Guyana and Suriname, and then to Central America in Belize, and of course, in the Northern Caribbean, just below the Bahamas, there is Haiti, the largest of our CARICOM member states, about 11 million people out of a CARICOM, which is in the region of close to 20 million. Troubled Haiti. And when we speak of the Caribbean, we have to speak of Haiti. Indeed, the 11th, 12th, and 13th of this month, in fact, this week, starting on Sunday, there was a stakeholders meeting organized by CARICOM. Stakeholders from all the sectors in Haiti, government and non-governmental organizations, over 50 of them, met in Jamaica. And we will be reflecting at our 50th anniversary summit in Trinidad and Tobago on the outcome of this particular stakeholders gathering, and to see how we can push with other countries in the United Nations and in our hemisphere for peace, security, good governance, and prosperity for all Haitians. It's a tall order, but Haiti is part of our family. And we have to help to look after our family. All the countries in CARICOM are independent, save and except Montserrat, which through a peculiar historical circumstance joined the original CARICOM organization in 1973. But there are other non-independent countries which are associate members of CARICOM. So that's the Caribbean community. And within it, within the Caribbean community, there's a tighter organization of 6 independent states in the Eastern Caribbean and 3 non-independent states, the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States. This is a tighter organizational grouping, which, for instance, has its own currency, its own court system, one currency. We have the regulatory framework for all of us for civil aviation and the like. Much tighter integration movement than CARICOM. And then there's the Association of Caribbean States. It's a very interesting organization. It consists of all countries and territories washed by the Caribbean Sea. It includes all these countries from CARICOM, but it also includes independent states washed by the Caribbean Sea, such as the islands of Cuba and the Dominican Republic, which is the other half of the island, which is Haiti, old Hispaniola, divided between Dominican Republic, Spain, and Haiti, the French, until the establishment of the first Black Republic in 1804 in our hemisphere. And the Association of Caribbean States includes countries like Venezuela. It includes Colombia, Mexico, Central American countries like Nicaragua and Costa Rica and Panama. And because of its closeness and integration with El Salvador, though El Salvador is a Pacific country, we have the Association of Caribbean States, including El Salvador. And the Association of Caribbean States addresses 5 functional areas: trade, tourism, technology, transportation, and disaster preparedness, climate-related issues. And of course, CARICOM has 4 broad areas: the coordination of foreign policy, security, trade and economic integration, and functional cooperation in the areas such as education, health, and the like. You will notice in the ACS, there's an important G20 country, Mexico, which is 130 million people. One of the largest 20 economies in the world. It's number 12 or 13, depending on the particular count in the particular year. But there is also CELAC, the Community of States of Latin America and the Caribbean, 33 member states, including all of the Caribbean, all the countries, independent states of the Caribbean, and all the independent states of Latin America. It's a joinder between it's the expression of a joinder between the Caribbean and Latin American civilizations. This is a body of 650 million people. One of the largest blocs in the world. The European Union is 600 million people of 27 states. And in this CELAC, there are 3 G20 countries: Mexico, Brazil, and Argentina. St. Vincent and the Grenadines is currently the pro tempore president of CELAC. We are the first CARICOM country and the smallest country ever to hold the presidency of CELAC. And we are leading the discussions for CELAC in the negotiations with the important blocs all over the world. And there's a critical conference at a summit with the European Union on the 17th and 18th of July. I mentioned 3 G20 countries in CELAC: Mexico, Argentina, and Brazil. And Brazil is vital in our consideration. Not only is it the largest economy in CELAC and the 6th, 7th largest economy in the world, but critical, and I will come to it further in the discussion, is the fact that Brazil is the country with the second largest, the state with the second largest number of persons who are African or of African descent in the world. The total population of Brazil is 220 million, and persons of African descent amount to 110 million. The only country which has more persons who are African or of African descent in the world is Nigeria, which has a population in excess of 200 million. Of course, Ethiopia is knocking its head up towards 110 million. And Egypt, which is African, but it is largely Arab, is close to 100 million. Well, once we are talking first about June 1619 and talk about enslaved African bodies, and we're talking about Brazil, they become critically part of the diaspora of Africa. And our Caribbean is central to that diaspora of Africa. And this African diaspora, including persons of African descent in North America and in Europe, even though in North America the persons of African descent do not constitute a separate state. The 6th region encompasses not only the states, which are a majority population of African descent, and countries with African persons of African descent, like, for instance, in Brazil, in the United States or Canada, those in Europe. The 6 regions of Africa, of course, are the North Africa, South Africa, East Africa, West Africa, and Central Africa. Those are 5 regions on the continent of Africa itself. So you notice I've spoken about the different Caribbean, the way the Caribbean is, the net I casting it wide, and put it also with Latin America. And I made a link with the African Union. But in order to deal with the Caribbean, I have to, and I must raise, if when we're talking about how the future, how the past has been shaped, how it has evolved, and what we're doing about the future, and so as not to desecrate it. we must remember that in the Caribbean, and this may shock some people, you have more territories in the Caribbean, which are colonies, which are non-independent, than in any other region of the world. I'll call them out for you. The United States of America is the colonial power in the following countries in the Caribbean: Puerto Rico, St. Croix, St. Thomas, and St. John. The British are the colonial power in respect of Anguilla, Bermuda, Turks and Caicos, the British Virgin Islands, Montserrat, and the Cayman Islands. The French are the colonial power in respect of Martinique, Guadeloupe, French Guyana, St. Barts, and French St. Martin. And the Dutch are the colonial power in respect of Aruba, Curacao, Bonaire, Saba, St. Eustatius, and the Dutch side of St. Martin, 21 of them. And clearly, any entity which is interested in the further ennoblement of our Caribbean civilization must put at its center the consideration of the independence of these countries, certainly their autonomy, and not for them to be divorced from the central regional organizations, like, for instance, the OECS, CARICOM, or the Association of Caribbean States. So that even as they evolve, that they are culturally part of us, there's geographical propinquity, and we are all formed by the same forces historically and shaped in the contemporary times and affected in one way or the other by the contemporary political economy globally. So, this Caribbean which I'm describing, it is metaphorically like a symphony. We are the songs of the indigenous people. We are the Amerindians, we are the Kalinago, we are the Garifuna. We are the songs of the indigenous people. We are the rhythm of Africa. We are the melody of Europe. We are the chords of Asia, and we are the homegrown lyrics of the Caribbean. Like all symphonies, from time to time, we have dissonances. And those dissonances in our Caribbean civilization, we resolve them or we mute them through the evolution of our cultural forms, derived from the genius of our people, or we resolve them or mute them through formal institutions, the parliament, the courts, and so on and so forth. And this Caribbean civilization, its journey has been very interesting. We have moved from an indigenous people who lived more or less in a communal condition and evolving through their own homegrown ways and rhythm and like in societies all over the world, how they have evolved. And then European colonialism entered the picture. And we began to see a rupture in these societies. And Europe remade these territories, these countries in our Caribbean, and of course in Latin America. And they did so in North America. And in the remaking, the population mix changed. Europe carried out large-scale genocide against the indigenous people, for which we demand reparations. Reparations for native genocide, and certainly in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we are demanding reparations from Europe for the native genocide in our country, where they practically wiped out the indigenous Kalinago and Garifuna towards the end of the 18th century. And we have a connection with Central America because a large number of the persons who are not killed in this genocidal war by the British against our people who resisted. They deported large numbers to the Bay of Honduras, to Rattan Island. And from there, these sturdy people who went to Belize, to Nicaragua, to Guatemala, and to Honduras. And the Garifuna, a mixture of Africans and the indigenous Kalinago. This is St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Urimi, as their spiritual home. Indeed, worldwide today, it is estimated that there are some 250,000, some put the number as high as 350,000 Garifuna, not only in St. Vincent, but also in Central America, and very much in important places in the United States, such as in California, and also in New York, in the Bronx, especially. So you notice this, the demographic changes which begin with the genocide of indigenous peoples, accompanied at the same time by the enslavement of African bodies. Some 20 million came into what is called the New World. In the case of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, some 65,000 were forcibly put on ships and enslaved in West Africa, right? The west coast of Africa down to Angola. But only 55,000 disembarked. Over 9,000 perished in the Middle Passage. And of course, this is replicated in all the countries where slaves were put on the ships in West Africa and right down to the Congo, right down to Angola. And there was a large number who perished in the Middle Passage. So we had enslaved Africans coming in. And then in the Caribbean, in the English-speaking Caribbean, and in different times in other countries which were under Spanish or Portuguese colonialism, as in the case of Angola, in the case of Brazil, after the abolition of slavery in the Caribbean, British emancipation, the Emancipation Act of 1833, where you had slavery at an end in 1834 in the English-speaking Caribbean, an apprenticeship period for 4 years, and then finally slavery was abolished in 1838, August the 1st. And when you needed more labor, they then went for persons from Madeira and brought them as indentured servants, as in fact how my foreparents came, were brought to St. Vincent and the Grenadines. It wasn't slavery, but you are indentured to an employer, a planter, part of the planter merchant elite. You're indentured with one of them for a 2-year period. And in the case of St. Vincent and Grenadines, between 1845 and 1850. And then still when you needed more labor, the British went to India. And in the case of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, between 1861 and 1880, you had Indians brought from India here, as in fact were taken to Suriname, were taken to Guyana and Trinidad, where they constitute in Guyana, Trinidad, and Suriname significant portions of those countries' population. And we are demanding reparations for the enslavement of African bodies in respect of the legacy of underdevelopment which flowed from the enslavement of African bodies. And there is empirical evidence galore about the legacy of underdevelopment caused by native genocide and the enslavement of African bodies. And this is a separate category of the demand for reparatory justice. And CARICOM has proposed a 10-point plan. You can look it up on the internet. You will see the 10-point plan for reparations. We have set up a CARICOM Reparations Commission headed by Sir Hilary Beckles, the Vice Chancellor of the University of the West Indies, and we have reparation commissions or committees in every one of the countries within CARICOM. And that is something which we are pushing, and we can have more discussion in it another time. I can speak on that subject at length. As Cheryl has pointed out, I've written a particular volume on the subject. Now, the society has evolved, our Caribbean, from one in which you had a plural society, not a plural society in a political sense, I'm talking now sociologically, in which each ethnic, racial, or cultural section had its own distinct pattern of sociocultural integration. Amidst with all the racism. And that society, over the period of time, has evolved in our Caribbean from one, which is a plural one, to one that became heterogeneous and then more homogeneous around and united around a core of shared values. But still, as I've said in our civilization, with dissonances, what we address those dissonances either through the cultural institutions which have evolved from the genius of our people or through our formal institutions. That's why we have to come home to ourselves and see the world through the prism of our own eyes. And what is this world? You know, imperialism and hegemony, as indeed colonialism, hitherto, and neocolonialism in this current period, sometimes passes under the rubric of globalization, monopoly capitalist globalization. That they want us to think that this world is what you may call the golden 1.2, 1.3, 1.4 billion, consisting of just about 35 states in the world. But remember this, there are 193 countries at the United Nations. Now this golden billion plus, oh, they are critical in the world, vital. Indeed, collectively very dominant. This golden billion consists of billion plus consists of the United States of America, which is close to 350 million people. Canada, which is 40-odd million. Then you have Britain, which is 65 million. The European Union consists of 27 countries with about 600 million. And then you have Australia and New Zealand, and you have 2 non-Caucasian countries, but wrapped up in the same mix because of the linkages of monopoly capitalism, that is to say Japan and South Korea. And Israel in the Middle East is part of this. No doubt, those are 35 countries. But you have 158 countries remaining in the world. I'm not talking now about non-independent, I'm not including non-independent countries. I'm talking about those of the 193 members of the United Nations. And these, I'm speaking towards facts so that we'll have a conception as to how we have to come to terms with the world. So the world, our Mother Earth, has 8 billion inhabitants today. But the golden billion plus in these 35 countries, very important, of strategic significance. But remember that we have nearly 7 billion people outside. 650 in Latin America and the Caribbean, 650 million. 1.4 billion in 54 states in Africa. 1.4 billion in India. 1.4 billion in the People's Republic of China. In the 10 states in the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, about 600 million, with the largest Muslim country in that group, Indonesia, of 300 million almost. Then you have other Muslim countries, largely like Pakistan and Bangladesh. And then you go to the Middle East, with Saudi Arabia is a dominant power. And then there is Iran, which is not Arab, but Muslim, but it is Persian, about 90 million people. An ancient civilization. You meet Persia in the Hebrew Bible, in the book of Daniel. You go into the book of Daniel, or you go into any book in the Bible, you don't find the United States of America, nor you find Canada. Important countries, but I'm talking about ancient civilizations, which they seek to tell us, those who want to control our minds, that somehow they are just aberrations. Just like you can imagine that they are weapons of mass destruction and lie to the world that Iraq has them. But Iraq was there as an ancient civilization. Between the Tigris and Euphrates River. It's inside of the Hebrew Bible. It's an ancient civilization. Over 6,000 years old. It's the first place you had commercial agriculture. But the neocons bomb it to thy kingdom come. Because they told United Nations, the pack of lies, that they had weapons of mass destruction. but they had none. And the place is a failed state. And look at what happened in North Africa with Libya. And then, of course, there is Russia, as part of this world, with 150 million people, the largest landmass in the world. Largest landmass in the world, with more nuclear weapons than any other country. So how do we relate to all of this as the Caribbean, and also the Caribbean diaspora, and not just the Caribbean diaspora, but also the African diaspora? Because we mustn't conceive of it only in terms of the Caribbean diaspora. We have to talk about it in connection with the African diaspora. And we must not forget that there is in the world an organization called BRICS: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, which is a powerful and growing bloc, in which Saudi Arabia is making its links. And you hear Macron in France raising the possibility of joining in with the BRICS. And that itself wants to enlarge. It's fascinating what is taking place in the world. And we have to define ourselves through the prism of our own eyes and through our own interests and humanity's interests. Because on this dangerous road to Jericho, we are our brother's keepers. The Levite may pass, the priest may pass, the lawyer may pass, but we have to be like the Good Samaritan, metaphorically, and help to bind up wounds and to take those who are suffering to the inn for comfort. Now, the Caribbean is located where it is. I've given the broad view of the Caribbean, and I've spoken about where we are located in the world. So, what do we do? Well, I can't take up St. Vincent and the Grenadines and carry to Vladivostok or the mouth of the Amur River. Remember, history has made us compromises, but we don't have to be compromising. And Europe made us, and in the process remade themselves. So we have to understand the dialectic in that process and the multiple contradictions which exist. Some of these contradictions are antagonistic and some are non-antagonistic. And we have to analyze them and bring the judgment to bear and the leadership to carry forward a particular set of ideas and policies and programs. So, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, for instance, and I can speak in this thing for the countries in the Caribbean, but I'll speak authoritatively for St. Vincent and the Grenadines, since I'm its Prime Minister. I can't lift up St. Vincent and the Grenadines and take it to Vladivostok or the mouth of the Amur River. It's where it is. And the largest Vincentian city in the world is Brooklyn. And we get a lot of remittances from our migrants in the United States of America and elsewhere, but very much so from the United States of America. We have a large diaspora there, St. Vincent and Grenadines and the whole of the Caribbean. We get most tourists from America. We get significant investments from the United States of America. We are influenced by the popular culture of the United States of America. Sometimes we are influenced by some of the terrible things in that popular culture. But that is part of our process of education and socialization as to how to address those things. A lot of guns and bullets come from the United States of America because in that country there seemed to be such a love for guns that it triumphs love of human beings. So it appears from the outside. So there are all these things where we are located here. But not because I can't move St. Vincent from where it is, and because there are all these benefits and burdens from our location, that doesn't mean that I have to roll over and play dead because of the power of the United States of America. No. So the option is not to roll over and play dead. It's to come home to ourselves and to ask our grandparents and our parents and our sons and our daughters and to make a whole daughter and a whole son out of the compromises which the fever of history has made us. So what do we do if we're not going to roll over and play dead? Though imperialism would wish if we roll over and play dead, but I'm not in that particular option. So we make accommodations. And in addition to making accommodations, we resist creatively where it is necessary and desirable for us to resist creatively. And there are many things upon which we resist creatively. In our Caribbean, the way I've defined it, there's Cuba, there's Venezuela, and there's Nicaragua. The United States of America has, from 1961, carried out a relentless war against the Cuban people with an embargo, which is clearly illegal in international law, and where the bulk of the people in the world, as represented in the nations of the United Nations. And Americans don't know this. There are only 2 countries, sometimes 3 every year at the United Nations, that vote with the United States of America in respect of this illegal embargo. Israel is one, sometimes Micronesia. Even their friends in Europe vote for the lifting of this embargo, which is a criminal thing, and people are suffering. And the same thing is happening in Venezuela, where the Trump sanctions against Venezuela, they have helped to impoverish that country, make it life very difficult. And President Biden, who has made very important outreaches to the Caribbean, the United States still keeps under the Biden administration, keeps these sanctions going, and it's wrong. And the same thing in respect of Nicaragua. No. It is evident, certainly to me, that what is dominant here with the United States of America in relation to these 3 countries is presidential, gubernatorial, senatorial, and congressional politics of South Florida. But we cannot, in the Caribbean, make the domestic politics in relation to South Florida imprison our international relations. But look at this. They're the sanctions. But the Biden administration, because of the war which is taking place in Ukraine and the problem in the shortage of supply of oil, what have they done in relation to Venezuela in that regard? They have lifted the sanctions for Chevron to get a license to explore and drill oil in Venezuela, and for Chevron to pay Venezuela cash, US dollars. But Venezuela and Trinidad and Tobago have an agreement in respect of exploitation of natural gas in the Gulf of Paria at the boundary between Venezuela and Trinidad. And the Venezuelans have given them the permission to do it. And the Americans have said, yes, Trinidad, you can do an arrangement with Venezuela. And they lift the sanction in that respect. But Trinidad can't pay them in US dollars. What do you want them to pay them in? Bottle stopper? And Europe has been given a dispensation to purchase fuel from Venezuela. But we in the Caribbean, the sanctions are not lifted in relation to the Petro-Carib agreement, from which countries like St. Vincent and the Grenadines benefited immensely, and which assisted us in reducing poverty in our country, and the same thing in other Caribbean countries. How can that be fair or reasonable? So I'm appealing to the good sense of our friends in the United States of America. And particularly in a month like this, when enslaved African bodies were brought to the United States for the first time and set off what the United States called the original sin, at least the ruling class. But as a good Catholic boy, I know that we are all born in original sin when we come into this world. But we can go, we get to the heavenly city as we mature if we go on the path of redemption and have the saving grace, that amazing grace which save a wretch like me. I once was blind, but now I see. But you're not getting that. You still have the legacy manifesting itself also in contemporary public policy in the global political economy. It's wrong. And I say that to our American friends. St. Vincent and Grenadines, we have a good friendship with the United States of America. But I have to speak honestly to our friends. As I said, we cannot take up St. Vincent and the Grenadines and carry it to Vladivostok or the mouth of the Amur River. We are where we are. And we are joined as neighbors with the United States. We are a border. We are bordered with the United States of America. Now, how are we going to strengthen our relations between Africa and the Caribbean? Well, we have had our first Africa CARICOM summit. And I had proposed, and it is accepted as part of the summit, that we build a permanent commission, what I call the ABCD Commission. That's the proposal. Africa, Brazil, the Caribbean, including Cuba, ABC, and of course the diaspora. That is to say, that diaspora which is outside of Brazil and the Caribbean, including the diaspora in the United States of America. And we have to ensure that those factors which predispose us historically to a joinder, and those in the contemporary political economy which induce us to a closer relationship, we must ensure that that predisposition and that inducement become grounded in a shared expression which has a base in viable institutions. And that's why the Prime Minister of Barbados and I, within the next few days, we're going to Ghana. There's the 30th anniversary of the Africa Export-Import Bank. We are going to speak there. The investment monies which will be available currently, with those of us who are participating, would be about $1.5 billion. 1.5 billion. And when Jamaica and Trinidad, as I expect that they will come on, that number would rise to 3 billion in terms of investments. This is how we have to do it. And this morning, I had a breakfast meeting with representatives from the Central American Bank, the CAF. And several of us are joining. Barbados is already a member. Trinidad and Tobago is a member of the Central American Bank. They have investments in the Caribbean and Central America currently. Their loan portfolio is 30 billion. And by 2025, 27, they anticipated that that will rise to 60 billion. And I'm very happy to see institutions like the Caribbean American Chamber of Commerce Incorporated is involved here. We want to see our investors from the United States, or Caribbean people, or other people, other nationalities, including Americans themselves, come and invest more in our Caribbean and in our Central America and in Latin America. Now, we have 17 sustainable development goals. Am I speaking too long, or should I cut it? What's the? I'm just asking. Should I speak just for a few more minutes?
We're good, sir. We'll look at the chair.
Huh?
Yes, sir, we're good.
We are going okay?
Yes, sir, we're fine.
Okay, fine. I just want to know. I mean, I'm sorry. I can talk about this thing all night until as we say in our culture, until 4 in the morning. But I know we don't have until 4 in the morning. No. In September 2015, we signed on to the 17 Sustainable Development Goals at the United Nations. And these goals relate to things which we know in sustainable development, with health, with education, with energy, with transport, with cultural matters, dealing with citizen security, poverty, hunger, housing, urban development, food security, but it also in its 17th Sustainable Development Goal enjoins the developed countries to have with us efficacious partnerships. Well, we hear a lot of talk, but we don't see a lot of money to support that talk. You can't say that in this earth, where we are all in this family together, that a small proportion of within, and only a small proportion within the countries which might be the golden billion plus. Because in the United States of America, you have about 50 million people who are in abject poverty, in the richest country in the world. Bernie Sanders talks about that all the time. And he's quite right. I'm not getting involved in the internal American politics, but I'm just talking about since we are in this earth together, on this earth together in all humanity, we have to work together in a multilateral way to solve these problems, which we agreed, these 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Well, the 16. And then the 17th is that we must build efficacious partnerships. One of the important questions is that touching on concerning climate change. It's existential. We know the facts. We know the Paris Accord. We know that even before the Paris Accord, it was said that from 2020, there'll be $100 billion available every year for us to have a quote-unquote green revolution and to provide for adaptation and mitigation. I haven't seen the money. There are bits and pieces, dribs and drabs here and there. St. Vincent and the Grenadines contributes near to zero in respect of climate change, but we are on the front lines. Our coastal erosion, you know, since the end of the Second World War on the east coast of our country, where the Atlantic hits, and even on the softer Caribbean side, on the western side of the country, we see the coastal erosion. It is so significant, climate change issues, that 60% of our capital budget is spent on issues dealing with mitigation, dealing with adaptation, and the consequences of natural disasters. 60%. I'm not seeing the money, the significant money is to deal with this problem, affecting the weather patterns. So we have to address this. Of course, there are climate change deniers about. And those countries which do not reject climate change and which formally embrace it, the efforts are minuscule to the task at hand. So every year, under the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, we have these conferences. There's a lot of talk. And in Egypt, in Sharm el-Sheikh, we pressed them to set up a fund, a special fund for what is called it's a special damage fund, loss and damage fund. But they played the cruel joke. They say, yes, we set up the fund. But they put no money in it. A fund with no money is an oxymoron. I indicated at the beginning I'm going to speak very frankly. And there's nowhere better for me to speak frankly than at Medgar Evers. Because Medgar Evers wouldn't want me to speak other than frankly. No. I am, now, I want to begin to summarize. I raise enough issues. All hegemonic powers in the world are saying, whether they have the West or the East, are saying they want a new world order. I want a new world order too. But there are three questions I want to ask to have answered. First, what's new? Secondly, which world? And thirdly, who gives the orders? What's new? Which world? And who gives the orders? That's what I want to find out. In shaping the future, we need not to desecrate it. And the economic model has to be one of building a modern, competitive, many-sided post-colonial economy, which is at once national, regional, and global. And the United States of America has a role to play in that, and Canada, and Europe, and Africa, and Asia, and Latin America, all countries in the world, we have to engage. I've written about this subject in my recent book, published in September last year, A Time of Despair. Beyond COVID, volcanic eruptions, Hurricane Elsa, and global turmoil, fresh hope for St. Vincent and the Grenadines. I want to end with a quotation from Errol Barrow, national hero of Barbados, former prime minister, who at the Miami Conference on the Caribbean in November 8, 1986 said this. I'm quoting him in a book which I wrote called Our Caribbean Civilization and Its Political Prospects. This is what Barrow said. It is dehumanizing and false to view the Caribbean as potential American problems. We are peoples with an identity and a culture and a history. The Parliament of Barbados will be 350 years old in 1989. He was writing this in 1986. We don't need lessons in democracy from anyone. However severe the economic difficulties facing the Caribbean, we have viable, functioning societies with the intellectual and institutional resources to understand and grapple with our problems. Collectively, we have the resource potential necessary for our continued development. And of course, we have a heritage of exquisite natural beauty entrusted to us. The Caribbean is, after all, a civilization. We are not anybody's backyard or front yard. We come home to ourselves through the prism of our own eyes. And we have to make a whole daughter and a whole son out of the compromises which the fever of history has made us without being compromising. We are not going to roll over and play dead. We are going to make accommodations. We are going to resist creatively. And we are going to look at the entire world, and we are engaging everybody, including our friends in the United States of America, and they are very good people in the United States of America. Very, very good people, and we have a lot of good allies. We must not be engaged in any learned helplessness. We must point towards solutions, as I've done. We have to go to the genius of our people, which is in that fluid consciousness. And we have to remember the hopeful message. The hopeful message with faith and with love. And love is an ever-fixed mark that looks on tempest and is never shaken. That hopeful message. In a book which I always consider to be misnamed, called Lamentations, though it was about Babylonian captivity of the Hebrew people. And the words were very powerful. The promise, the hope. Morning by morning, new mercies we see. All that we need, thy hand hath provided. Great is thy faithfulness. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gonsalves. As expected, you did not disappoint. That was a very invigorating discussion, leaving us all with much food for thought. So at this point in time, I want to just open it up in the event that there are any questions that members of the audience, whether online or in person, would like to field. Our first question from the floor.
Good afternoon, how are you? My name is Carla Garcia. I'm a Garifuna woman. I'm born in Honduras. My ancestors were exiled from the island of St. Vincent. And I returned to our mother island last year, not as a tourist, as a member of the community. And I went in the island of Baliso for 24 hours, just feeling and just trying to understand how difficult it was for my ancestors, stay there, die there, and then be exiled from their own country. This year I returned and I brought my son and 3 more elders. I made my savings and I went there. My son is 17 years old. And as soon as he arrived to St. Vincent, he said, "Mom, I feel home." My question is in regard of this beautiful history that now the Garifuna, the Black community, the indigenous community don't know, but I can understand through the speech of Dr. Gonsalves that he knows that history. And it's very easy to understand what he's saying and why he's saying it. Our history was very erased, but still there in the way that we live in our communities, especially in Honduras, when we continue managing the language and majority of the cultural knowledge of the community. Why is my question? And at the same time I'm demanding a reparation in that area. Why our history is not being shared with the descendants of the people of the Caribbean. The Caribbean is the island that in the time of the colony was called, or the islands of the Caribbean were called the door of America. Everybody came to America and passed through the Caribbean first. Now, we have a diaspora living around the world, because something that I learned is that at the same time that we were exiled to Honduras, another portion of indigenous and Black communities from the islands were exiled to Europe. And we have a lot of Garifuna or our brothers and sisters that they don't know that they exist or from where they're coming from. We need to return to our root as community, to get everything that Dr. Gonsalves is fighting for and dreaming for. The only way is knowing our history. I don't know if people know here, and I'm not going to extend because I like to speak a lot. I don't know if you know that the word
hurricane is coming from our island. And everyone use the word hurricane, and it's part of our culture. I don't know if people know that our indigenous ancestors knew 50 constellations in the sky. When Spaniards, England, French, Dutch came to our islands, they only knew 15. We have a rich story that brought us back to our roots. So 2 questions. 1, when our story will be disclosed to everyone? Second one, when the Garifuna community will be invited as a whole to return to home? Thank you.
All right, so to recap that, the 2 key questions were, why isn't the history of the Garinagu people better taught and better ingrained, I guess, into the educational and larger cultural education of not just St. Vincent, but perhaps the region. And the second question, the second part of that question is, when do we have a welcoming home of St. Vincent's lost children, the Garinagu?
Over the last 22 years, since my government has been in office, we have accelerated the efforts to make sure that our people understand our history better. And we have been writing it. I myself, I've been doing work in this regard. But we have established, the government has established a group with 4 eminent Vincentian historians, Dr. Michael Denny, Dr. Adrian Fraser, Dr. Cleve Scott, and Dr. Thomas. And they're working on that history. We are hoping that we can have the first volume, which addresses the condition when the Europeans met here in the when settlement was established in 1763 by the British, and before that time, and what has happened in that time with the reshaping of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. The first volume, which will cover that period, I've been advised, is quite advanced. I've seen a draft of it, and there's been reworking. So I want to tell my dear sister that is happening. And you're welcome to come to St. Vincent and the Grenadines. I want to say this. There are no visas required from Guatemala, Honduras, Nicaragua, or Belize, for anybody from those countries to come to St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Now, I just want to make that point. Of course, there are other countries which you don't require visas from to come to St. Vincent and the Grenadines, but I mentioned those in particular because they're relevant in this context. I want something to be recognized, my brothers and sisters. St. Vincent and the Grenadines is the last of the resistance by indigenous peoples in the hemisphere. The Kalinago and the Garifuna led a resistance against the British from 1764 to 1795. And the might of the British armed forces took that length of time to be able to defeat them. When they ambushed Chatoyer, who is now, whom we made a national hero in 2002, a year after we came to office, and is still our only national hero. And then the the decimation of the population through native genocide. And then exile, as my sister spoke about. And it is also important to realize this, that the militancy of the Garifuna was very much fueled by the slaves, the enslaved African bodies who escaped. You can't enslave their mind, enslave their bodies, but in their resistance when they left Barbados, when they ran away from Barbados, they took boats and came to St. Vincent, before the British arrived. And they intermixed with the indigenous Kalinago population. And you had the Garifuna emerging. That's one strain of Africans, one group of Africans who came before the settlement, before conquest and settlement by the British. And by the way, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we had, compared to the old plantation colonies like Jamaica, Antigua, Barbados, St. Kitts, and the others, we had a relatively short period of enslavement of African bodies from 1764 to 1838. In Jamaica, it was since 1655, Barbados since 1630, St. Kitts Nevis since 1625, and so on and so forth. And as in the case of the United States, since 1619. And that factor, plus our resistance to British colonialism, native resistance, mark us out in a special historical space in the historiography of the hemisphere, and that must be taught also.
So we have another question from the floor, but before I take that one, I'm going to pose another question for you. So as a key leader in CARICOM, and as one of the region's longest standing leaders, as we celebrate CARICOM's 50th anniversary, how do you assess the success of CARICOM in advancing the cause of regionalism, regional cooperation? And what do you think are the greatest challenges moving forward for CARICOM as it moves into the next 50 years?
Progress has been substantial but uneven. We have made significant progress, for instance, in some areas of freedom of movement, economic integration, some security collaboration, and dealing with foreign policy. But yet, in each of those areas in which we have made successes, we still have had limitations. And there's a peculiar thing about islands. In our Caribbean, we are an island civilization. Even continental Guyana and Suriname and Belize have an islandness about them because the bulk of the population you find on the coast. Islands are peculiar because when you're on an island, there is this tremendous inward look. But because it is an island and you see the water around you, there is naturally an outward gaze. So there's this tension always between the inward look and the outward gaze. And there is still a great deal of insularity in segments of our population. That is changing. And there are political elites with constituencies which want to go thus far in the integration process, but not further. As time goes by, we are going to see changes in that because the global situation, the global political economy is demanding that we have this level of unity to confront the world. St. Vincent and Grenadines are 110,000 people. The entire CARICOM is 20 million people. But there are 8 billion people in the world. We have to come together. It's an absolute necessity in order to come to terms more capably within the interests of our people. It is self-evident. And I think this is the same islandness which had Britain kicking and screaming to the European Union and which led them to exit. So I speak frankly on that, but that's a work in progress. And I'm hopeful that the diaspora can help. When you're in New York, of course we have our national associations and the like, and they're important. But when you're interfacing with the rest of the society, they're not so much worried about you being a Vincentian or a Grenadian or a Jamaican or anything like that. They tend to see us as migrants from the Caribbean.
Well, that actually leads to the second question which I had for you. Beyond remittances, like what role do you see the diaspora, such as New York, as you mentioned, playing in advancing the development of the region?
Oh, they're doing so already, but they can do much more. In the area of skills, the people in the United States of America, look, a number of persons don't like me say this, but the Caribbean is underpopulated. We need more people in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. We need more in Barbados. We need more in Jamaica. The only place in the Caribbean where you probably have the significant population is in Haiti. And people may say, well, you have unemployment and you have 110,000 people. Well, part of the reason is because you don't have a large base, population base. So I would like to see the population increase. And I'd like to see people with technical skills come in and help us. Right now, we are enjoying, last year we had 6% economic growth. This year we're going to have 6%. There's no construction worker, tradesman who wants work in this country today who can't get it. In fact, there is an increase in economic activity as we have never seen in the history of this country. And we have constraints with skills, with the population. We need investors too from our own diaspora. We are making a lot of progress on the cultural side. But we need to make more on the economic side and on the skills return side.
Fantastic. I'm going to return later to ask you a follow-up question, but in the meantime, I'm going to take another question from the floor.
Good night. My name is Egbert Chaka Edinio. I'm from Belize. I was born in Belize. And I want to thank Dr. Gonsalves for this presentation tonight, and also for hosting me last year, earlier this year, I think, in Uruman, St. Vincent.
I remember you, brethren. I remember you.
Yes, I like your frankness. I like what you thought, and I want to invite you to a park, a humanity park. I'm having a pass it through your office here in New York. But my question or request has to do with Habina Garinagu. I'm working with James Lovell to go back to St. Vincent and train to talk about resistance and talk to the young people, teach them the language, the dance, the Gershna dance. And we're asking for your office to assist fully with these 100 kids that we want to do.
I tell you up front easily, you're pushing an open door.
Very good.
Send me the proposal.
All right. The other question or the other proposal has to do with Balisal. I heard the sister talk about, oh, we were exiled. I like how you put it. We were genocided. We were genocided, right? And deterritorialized. I like how you express it, Prime Minister. I want to commit to do something about Balisal. Not only talk about it, but to develop it as a shrine where a crime was committed. As a project, I want to commit to that. And so that I'm telling you this here to help you developed the idea to have Balisau recognized as an international shrine where crimes were committed. Thank you.
Now, in relation to Balisau, persons who may not know, Balisau was the staging post for the British. Took about 5,000 Garifuna, from the Garifuna nation to Balisau. And they were there for 6 months. They didn't have food, water. Half of them died, and the other half were taken to Roatan Island in the Bay of Honduras. They were exiled there forcibly. Very interestingly, the only animals which survived on Balisau were lizards and iguana. The same thing in Roatan Island. Of course, Roatan Island has now been developed as, in part, a touristic island. Balisau is owned privately, and we are interested in seeing Balisau develop, and we are interested also in a program where the government is central in that, including an appropriate memorial. I have spoken to comrades, to brothers and sisters. Even though Balisau, they get worried from time to time that Balisau will be sold to some other private entity to build a house for a rich man and so on. Look, let me say this straight. In order for any foreigner to buy Balisau, they have to get an alien's landholding license. And an alien's landholding license has to carry with it a particular plan of development. And unless it is appropriate with a significant memorial component for our Garifuna and Kalinago brothers and sisters, our forebears who died there, it's just not going to happen. We are also looking at the issue as to how we ourselves, that is to say the state, can acquire Balisau. It is something which is, we naturally have to get the resources and for the development of it in the particular way, because Balisau doesn't have any water, it doesn't have light, it doesn't have any roads, it doesn't have a wharf, it doesn't, I mean, the infrastructure requirements are going to be very significant. So that is how I answer my brother. But I want to assure you that everything what I've just said to you, the will is there for these public policies to be followed and implemented. And I know that I will have full support from the Garifuna community in the United States of America and in
Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
Greetings, Honorable Eminent Gonsalves, Dr. Gonsalves.
Sister from Belize?
Definitely, we were in Rome recently, right?
I was.
Baku Eastern, ambassador for the Garifuna Nation, and this is the basis of my question. President spoke just now, so I am introducing him because he didn't articulate that. And my question relates to cooperation and collaboration with our relatives around the world, not just Garifuna, but Garifuna-led, indigenous-led, because we have been declared in 2001 Masterpiece Culture for Humanity by UNESCO. So my question, as I have been here going back to Belize on Sunday, thank God. I mean, nothing wrong with being here, of course, we don't know. I've been here, I've attended 2 UN forums last year, Permanent Indigenous People Forum, United Nations, this year, and also the Forum for African Descendants. And my question is asking you to assist us in accompaniment. How can it be possible?
How can we walk the talk in terms of learning how to navigate these systems and structures? Recently, we were in Los Angeles, and now Mayor Karen Bass told us when we attended her presentation, first consultation with immigrants in Los Angeles, she said, you know what, you need to be on this platform. And we asked her why. She said, because you are the largest immigrant population in Los Angeles. Therefore, Prime Minister, I would like us to really have some nitty-gritty conversations. I used to work at CARICOM, that's why I'm mentioning this, having this conversation. How do we develop the competency connecting with our brothers and sisters here in the diaspora and others to be able to have our voices heard alongside with you? How can we sit at the table where these discussions are taking place? That we are given the affirmation, the respect, the honor as the first peoples in this region. Garifuna embrace not only African, but also indigenous. Therefore, we can be a bridge for humanity. And we'd like to accompany you and support you in this conversation to break this cycle in universities, in the economic systems, and so on. Recently, I was on a Zoom meeting with the Caribbean Development Bank. Imagine, Prime Minister, first time in 40 years, indigenous people are being asked to be part of the conversation. I was recently in Jamaica with the Maroon leaders, University of the West Indies, and it was the first time in how many years that the University of the West Indies acknowledges us. We are not complaining, we are not lamenting, but Prime Minister, how can we take this to the next level so that we are present at the table to have our voices heard directly from us? That's my question, sir.
What I will say immediately, you are in New York. We have a mission there. Of course, there's Belize also, and I'm sure Belize would be equally responsive. I think you should have a discussion with the permanent representatives at the UN and to see the ways in which you can be involved in discussions on the issues which directly concern you, and for you to have an input. You may have some specific proposals of a more structured conversation between the Garifuna in the diaspora and with St. Vincent and the Grenadines, the government, and I will welcome that very much in areas where you think that we may be able to work closer and to put the broad agenda, including the agenda for reparations. But not just for reparations, but for all the sets of issues which you talk about, the history, the education, the culture, the language, the economy, and so on and so forth.
Thank you, Prime Minister, and to be continued.
To be continued. Thanks.
I have no questions, but
I would very much like if you spell out some things as you put it in nitty-gritty and see how we do them and we cost them and we have a practical program. Because what we do, we have a vision, we have a philosophy, we have a policy, and we have to have programs. And within programs, we have projects and we have to cost them. And some of them would be fairly low cost, some would be much more cost, and we see how we identify the resources together.
Due respect, Prime Minister, and thank you. I just wanted to say that, to thank you for after all these years. However, I would like a conversation where there is an affirmation and there is an acknowledgement of the indigenous way, which we call Garifuna Dwell. So we can have that conversation as well. And the example specific to that is that when I went to the Prime Minister of Belize, I've done so, he acknowledged that it's going to be more conversation. There's an openness, appreciation for the validation of who we are as Indigenous people, our ways of governance and so on. So we are going to have more conversation, and I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
The center is willing to, facilitate this dialogue in any way that we can. All right, I'll take two more questions. This one is coming from a member of Caribbean Press, actually. So Dr. King.
Okay, good night, everyone. My name is Dr. Nelson King. The Prime Minister knows me all too well. I'm a Vincentian by birth. I'm a Caribbean.
Chateaubelair.
Yeah, and besides being a journalist, I'm also a professor in economics in college here. And I taught here at McGivers College for 13 years. African American history, world civilization, American history, social sciences, and political science. In the interest of time, I will just ask one question, Mr. Prime Minister. I know everybody wants to go home. You mentioned about the proposal for the formation of an African, Brazil, and Caribbean bloc. Would you mind elaborating on that? I was not too clear on your presentation about that. Maybe you could talk about the goals and objectives and how soon you hope to get this started.
Well, CARICOM has accepted the idea of advancing a permanent Africa, Brazil, Caribbean diaspora commission. And that commission will address a range of issues: the economy, the trade, investments, culture, exchanges, sports. In short, a body which can get things done. You will remember, Nelson, I said that what we have to do is to make those things which predispose us to linkages, which induce us to linkages. We must take those predisposing and inducing factors and give them a shared experience, a shared institutional expression. Not just the experience, but the expression. And we have to do that through institutions. That's why I mentioned, for instance, well, we have several institutions I spoke about, including, I spoke about the Africa Exim Bank, the CAF from Central America. But we need to have a body which can drive this. I mean, you take the shortest. I'm going to Ghana. I have to go to London and then go to Ghana. You can go from Ghana to Dakar, which is the closest point on the Horn of Africa, to get to Brazil and just come up the road. I am. So there are all of these practical things we look at, but we need institutional arrangements, Nelson, because if we don't have the institutional arrangements, we are not going to be able to do the practical things. And that is what I was talking about. By the way, I made a recommendation about the ABCD Commission, and it was accepted. When Bolsonaro was president in Brazil, you know, now there's more favorable terrain that Lula is there, or our brother Lula is there.
Did you have a follow-up?
Okay, just another question, but it would be very remiss of me, Mr. Prime Minister, if I don't say publicly, as a matter of fact, commend our new Consul General, Mr. Randy Luther McIntosh, and the wonderful job he has been doing since he got here last August. So I just want to put that on record.
I'm very grateful to hear that. It didn't surprise me though, because as you know, I was a believer in Luther from the beginning.
Take the credit. Actually, so on that note, I'm actually going to just transition. We are at the end of our time allotment for this program. So before we go, however, we did want to present you with an award. So we're going to ask the Consular General to join us on stage. I'm also asking representatives from the Office of Academic Affairs, the President's Office, and our two co-sponsoring community partners to join us. Please join us on stage. Ms. Mason, please join us as well. Thank you. All right. So it is my distinct pleasure, sir, to offer to you, first of all, to thank you and to sincerely thank you. This was monumental for us in many ways. First of all, it was a fantastic lecture delivered on your part, but it was also a first, or two firsts for us. While we have had quite a few notable speakers from the region and locally, you are our first sitting head of state to have delivered in this particular speaker series. The executive directors before me had their own speaking programs, but in terms of this iteration of the Caribbean Research Center bringing this kind of programming. And so we want to thank you for agreeing to speak here. And we regret that you weren't able to be here in person, and we hope that you will accept an open invitation to deliver another lecture or for us to host a town hall for you to be able to speak to the people of St. Vincent and Grenadines throughout from our local diaspora, I guess. So I wanted to put that on record. It is also another first for us on a technological level. This is our first hybrid event in terms of delivering this particular programming over distance, and proving that the distance between us here in the diaspora and the region is absolutely irrelevant. The physical distance is irrelevant as long as the technology and the will exist for us to communicate and work together. So once again, a heartfelt thank you for being our keynote speaker. And on that note, it is my pleasure to present to you, sir, the Caribbean Research Center Speaker Award, and it reads as such: the Caribbean Research Center of Medgar Evers of the City University of New York Caribbean Research Center Speaker Award is presented to the Honorable Dr. Ralph Gonsalves, Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, in recognition of his participation in the 2023 CRC Speaker Series, this day, June 15th, 2023. Please, Yes, sir. Thank you for accepting on his behalf. Absolutely. Pleasure to have you as well. Yeah. Can we bring everyone out for Cisco Central? Producer, if you don't mind, put the Prime Minister back on the screen, please. I'd like to have him in the background. After all, his award.
And I thank you from the bottom of my heart. I thank you very, very much. And I appreciate your kind words. And I take the liberties of applying to the poetic injunction that heard melodies are sweet, but those unheard are sweeter.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Stay right there, Mr. Prime Minister.
Go for it, Ken.
He's in the way. Get another shot.
Oh.
And one more. Thank you.
Okay. Hold on. We have a couple of the photographers trying to get.
Okay.
Don't think I got down there. Thank you. No, she's using her further, she's using my long lens. Oh. She's a student athlete who was the camera used to shoot. There we go. One last one, Kenya. All right, there we go. On that note, I want to thank all of you for coming, and there are refreshments outside. Please feel free to partake. And we look forward. I'm sorry?
Thank you for the invitation.
Oh, no. We hope you will join us again for additional programming.
Thank you.
Yeah.